Imagine waking up one morning, looking at the person you've spent 3 decades with, and realizing you don't recognize them anymore. Or maybe you don't recognize yourself. Picture a life built on shared dreams, laughter, and promises, only to watch it crumble under the weight of silence, resentment, and secrets you didn't even know existed. My name is Tom, and after 30 years of marriage to the woman I thought was my forever, I'm signing divorce papers, packing up a life we built together, and wondering where it all went wrong. If you've ever loved someone so deeply it hurt, only to find yourself questioning if that love was enough, or if you faced the heartbreak of letting go when you're not even sure why, stay with me. This isn't just a story about a marriage ending. It's about the ache of lost time, the ghosts of what could have been, and the desperate search for answers when the person you thought you knew best becomes a stranger. I'm sitting on the creaky wooden porch of my soon-to-be former home in Traverse City, Michigan, a small town nestled along the shores of Lake Michigan, where the air always carries a hint of pine and water. It's a chilly autumn evening, the kind where the leaves turn fiery red and gold, crunching underfoot, and the lake glitters under a fading sun. I've got a mug of black coffee in my hands, gone cold now, as I stare at the moving boxes stacked by the front door. At 58 years old, I thought I'd be planning retirement trips with my wife, Ellen, not dividing up furniture and memories. My chest feels heavy, like I'm carrying 30 years of unspoken words, and I can't shake the question that's been haunting me for months. How did we get here? How did a love that once felt unbreakable turn into something so fragile it shattered without me even noticing? I grew up in Traverse City, in a modest clapboard house on the edge of town, where my dad worked as a mechanic and my mom taught third grade at the local elementary school. Life was simple back then. Summers spent fishing on the lake with dad, winters building snow forts with my buddies, and evenings helping mom grade papers at the kitchen table. I wasn't the most ambitious kid, but I had a stubborn streak, a need to prove I could make something of myself. By the time I was 20, I'd started working at a local hardware store, learning the ropes of retail, and dreaming of owning my own business someday. That's when I met Ellen, at a 4th of July festival downtown in 1983, where the air smelled of popcorn and grilled hot dogs, and fireworks lit up the night sky over Grand Traverse Bay. Ellen was 19, a summer intern at the local newspaper, with curly brown hair that caught the sunlight and a shy smile that made my heart skip. She was sitting on a picnic blanket with friends, sketching the crowd in a little notebook, when I worked up the nerve to ask if I could join her. I remember feeling like a clumsy idiot, tripping over my words, but she just laughed, a warm, genuine sound, and made room for me. We talked for hours that night, about everything from our favorite bands, hers was Fleetwood Mac, mine was Springsteen, to our dreams of escaping small-town life, even if just for a while. By the time the fireworks ended, I knew I'd met someone special, someone who saw me, not just as the hardware store guy, but as someone with potential, with a story worth hearing. We dated for 2 years before I proposed, on a quiet winter night by the frozen lake, with snowflakes dusting her hair as I fumbled with a simple gold band I'd saved months to buy. She said yes, tears in her eyes, and we married in a small church ceremony in the spring of 1985, surrounded by family and the scent of cherry blossoms, Traverse City's claim to fame during the annual festival. I remember standing at the altar, my hands sweaty, looking at her in a white lace dress, and feeling like I'd won the world. We were young, broke, and clueless, but we had each other, and that felt like enough. We rented a tiny apartment above a bakery downtown, where the smell of fresh bread woke us every morning, and started building a life, brick by brick, dream by dream. Over the next decade, life moved fast. I worked my way up at the hardware store, eventually buying it out in the early 90s with a loan that kept me up at night worrying. Ellen took a job as a graphic designer for a local ad agency, her sketches turning into logos and brochures that paid the bills. We had 2 kids, Sarah in '89 and Michael in '92, and bought a fixer-upper house on the outskirts of town, with a view of the lake from the back porch and a yard big enough for the kids to run wild. I remember those early years with a kind of golden haze. Ellen singing lullabies to Sarah while I rocked Michael to sleep, family picnics by the water where we'd eat PB&J sandwiches and watch the sailboats, and late-night talks on the couch after the kids were in bed, planning for a future we were sure would be bright. Sure, we had our struggles. Money was tight. The store demanded long hours, and Ellen sometimes felt overwhelmed juggling work and motherhood, but we always came back to each other, or so I thought. Looking back, though, I can see the cracks forming, even in those happy years. I was so focused on keeping the store afloat, on being a provider, that I didn't always notice how tired Ellen looked, how her smiles became forced when I'd come home late again. She'd mention feeling stuck, like her own dreams, of traveling, of pursuing art beyond client deadlines, were slipping away, but I'd brush it off, promising we'd get to it someday. I told myself I was doing it for us, for the kids, but maybe I was just avoiding the harder conversations, the ones where I'd have to admit I didn't have all the answers. And Ellen, she started pulling back too, spending more time in her little home office, sketching things she never showed me, her laughter growing quieter, her eyes sometimes distant when we'd sit across from each other at dinner. I'd lie awake some nights, listening to the wind off the lake, and wonder if I was losing her, but I'd push the thought down, too scared to face it. By the time the kids were teenagers in the 2000s, the distance between us had grown into a chasm, though we hid it well. Sarah and Michael were busy with school and sports, Sarah on the debate team, Michael playing varsity basketball, and our lives revolved around their schedules, giving us an excuse to avoid each other. I'd spend weekends at the store, dealing with inventory or helping customers, while Ellen took on more freelance projects, often working late into the night. We'd still do the family stuff, Thanksgiving dinners with my parents, summer barbecues by the lake, but it felt like we were playing roles, going through the motions of a marriage rather than living it. I remember one Christmas, maybe 2008, when the kids were opening gifts under the tree, and I caught Ellen staring out the window at the snow, her face unreadable. I wanted to ask what she was thinking, to reach for her hand, but I didn't. I just turned back to the kids, pretending everything was fine, while something inside me ached. The real breaking point didn't come with a big fight or a dramatic moment. It was a slow unraveling, a death by 1,000 cuts. By the time Sarah and Michael were in college in the early 2010s, the empty nest hit us hard. Without the kids as a buffer, the silence in our house became deafening. I'd come home from the store to find Ellen already in bed, or sitting on the porch with a glass of wine, lost in thought. Our conversations dwindled to logistics, bills, repairs, what's for dinner, and even those felt strained, like we were strangers sharing a space. I started noticing how we'd stop touching, how we'd sleep on opposite sides of the bed, how I couldn't remember the last time we'd laughed together. I felt this simmering resentment, blaming her for pulling away, for not fighting for us, but deep down, I knew I hadn't fought either. I'd let years of small hurts pile up, her criticism of my long hours, my dismissal of her need for more, and now they were a wall between us, too high to climb. Last year, after months of barely speaking beyond what was necessary, Ellen sat me down at the kitchen table one gray February morning, the lake outside shrouded in mist. She looked at me, her eyes tired but resolute, and said she thought we should separate. I remember the way my stomach dropped, the way the room seemed to tilt, even though part of me had seen it coming for years. I didn't argue, didn't beg her to stay, just nodded, feeling this strange mix of relief and devastation. We agreed to divorce quietly, to split everything down the middle, to tell the kids after we'd figured out the details. And just like that, 30 years of marriage were reduced to paperwork, to dividing up a life I'd thought would last forever. I moved into a small apartment near the store, while Ellen stayed in the house for now, and I started packing up my things, each item, a worn-out fishing rod, a photo album from our first vacation, feeling like a punch to the gut. The emotional conflict inside me has been a storm I can't escape. On one hand, I'm angry at Ellen for giving up, for not trying harder, for letting us drift so far apart that we couldn't find our way back. I've spent nights in my cramped apartment, staring at the ceiling, replaying every argument, every cold shoulder, wondering if she ever really loved me the way I loved her, or if I was just a habit she outgrew. I resent the years I poured into providing for our family, only to end up alone, with nothing to show for it, but a failing business and a broken heart. But then there's the other side, the part of me that still loves her, that aches for the girl I met at that festival, the woman who held my hand through every hardship, who gave me 2 amazing kids. I see her face in every corner of Traverse City, in the diner where we had our first date, in the park where we pushed Sarah on the swings, and feel this longing to understand what went wrong, to know if I failed her as much as I feel she failed me. I've spent months wrestling with guilt, too, questioning my own role in this mess. Was I too focused on the store, on being the man of the house, that I didn't see her struggling? Did I ignore her dreams, her need for more than just stability, until she felt trapped? I remember times I'd snap at her after a bad day, times I'd dismiss her ideas for a spontaneous trip or a new hobby, telling her we couldn't afford it, that we had responsibilities. I thought I was being practical, but maybe I was just building walls, shutting her out without realizing it. And now, as I face the reality of a life without her, I'm terrified, not just of being alone, but of discovering that I'm the reason we fell apart, that I pushed away the one person who ever truly knew me. Then came the unexpected twist, a discovery that turned my world upside down all over again. A few weeks ago, while sorting through old boxes in the garage of our house to finalize the division of property, I found a small, weathered shoebox tucked behind some camping gear. Inside were dozens of letters, all in Ellen's handwriting, addressed to me but never sent. My hands shook as I opened the first one, dated back to 1995, when the kids were little and I was working 60-hour weeks to keep the store afloat. In it, she wrote about feeling invisible, like she was just a mom and a wife, not a person with her own needs. She wrote about missing me, about lying awake wishing I'd come home earlier, hold her, ask how her day was. She admitted to feeling inadequate, like she wasn't enough to keep me interested, and feared I'd one day leave her for someone who could give me more. As I read through the letters, spanning decades, some written during our happiest times, others during our darkest, I felt my heart crack open. There were letters from the early 2000s, when the kids were teens, where she confessed to feeling lonely even with me in the same room, wondering if I still saw her as the woman I married. There was one from just 5 years ago, after a particularly bad fight over nothing, where she wrote about wanting to tell me she still loved me, but being too scared I'd reject her. Each letter was a window into a pain I'd never seen, a side of Ellen I'd never known, because she'd hidden it, just as I'd hidden my own doubts and fears. I sat there on the cold garage floor, surrounded by dusty relics of our life, tears streaming down my face, realizing that while I'd been blaming her for pulling away, she'd been reaching for me in ways I never noticed. Reading those letters changed everything, and yet, nothing. They confirmed that our marriage wasn't just a casualty of time or circumstance. It was a failure of communication, of two people who loved each other but didn't know how to say it when it mattered most. I felt a surge of anger, at her for not sending these letters, for not fighting harder to make me see her pain, and at myself for being so blind, for not asking the right questions, for letting pride and fear keep us apart. But beneath the anger was a profound sadness, a grief for the years we lost, for the love that was there but buried under layers of hurt. I wanted to run to her, to show her the letters, to ask why she never told me, to see if there was anything left to salvage. But I also feared what I'd hear, feared that too much time had passed, that the woman who wrote those letters wasn't the Ellen I know now. In the days since finding the letters, I've kept them hidden in my apartment, rereading them late at night when the loneliness feels heaviest. I haven't told Ellen I found them, haven't even spoken to her beyond a few curt texts about the divorce paperwork. I see her sometimes, when I drop off things at the house, and there's this unspoken tension, this weight of everything we haven't said. I notice the way her hands fidget, the way her eyes avoid mine, and wonder if she's as lost as I am, if she's carrying her own regrets. Part of me wants to lay it all bare, to confront her with the letters, to demand answers about why she kept this from me, if she still feels anything for me at all. But another part is paralyzed, scared that the truth will hurt more than the silence, that I'll learn she's moved on, that I'm clinging to a past she's already let go of. I've been spending a lot of time walking along the lake lately, the same paths Ellen and I used to take when we were young and full of hope. The water is calm most days, reflecting the gray autumn sky, and I think about the life we built here in Traverse City, the hardware store I poured my soul into, the house where we raised our kids, the quiet moments on this very lake where we'd sit and dream. I think about Sarah and Michael, now grown with lives of their own, and how they've taken the news of the divorce with a mix of sadness and resignation, as if they saw it coming long before we did. I feel this fierce need to protect them from more pain, to keep this discovery about the letters private until I know what it means, but I also feel the weight of their unspoken questions, their worry about whether their parents ever really loved each other. Reflecting on my past, I keep coming back to the lessons I learned growing up in this town, to the resilience my parents taught me. Dad always said, "Life's a grind, Tom, but you don't walk away from what matters." I've lived by that, sticking it out through tough times at the store, through the lean years of our marriage, through every storm I thought we'd weather together. But now, I don't know what matters anymore. I think about the early days with Ellen, the way we'd dance in our tiny apartment to scratchy records, the way she'd rest her head on my chest during thunderstorms, trusting me to keep her safe. I remember the day Sarah was born, holding her tiny body in the hospital while Ellen slept, feeling like I'd been given a purpose bigger than myself. Can I let go of all that, sign away 30 years as if they meant nothing? Or am I a fool for even considering fighting for something that might already be dead? Now, as I sit here on this porch, the lake shimmering in the distance, the weight of those unsent letters pressing down on me, I'm at a crossroads I never thought I'd face. I've tucked the shoebox under my bed in the apartment, but it's like a ghost, haunting me with what could have been if we'd just talked, if we'd been brave enough to.